So, that passion and drive it takes to accomplish a goal is, it's commendable no matter what you choose to do. And a lot of people have lost that art, I think, of goal setting. But when you do decide you want to buy a house, and especially the process of entering the home buyer's market now, which, as we just talked about the end of last hour, has really changed. Ryan, talk a little bit more about, once you maybe find that house, once you've gotten pre-approved, you understand your options, you've met with the lender, now you found that house and you got a contract. Yeah. Where do you think those next big pieces of the puzzle are to make sure you can actually close on the house and live in it?
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this a little bit during the break is, I think at the end of the day, it's all about controlling what you can control in any market, but especially in the real estate market now when it comes to, from our side is the lending side. What can we do to assist our clients and advise and educate them about the process to control what you can control to have the highest and best outcome we're all looking for, which is a smooth and uneventful purchase transaction and one that actually closes. So I think number one is going to be get your lender everything they need up front. And really go out of your way to ask them several times, tell me everything I need up front to make sure you have everything you need in my file from day one. And I think that's a challenge is not a lot of lenders ask for everything up front. And number two, clients don't go out of their way to say, is that it? Are you sure? Let me know everything I need now. And
Should be like a teller at a grocery store. Is that everything? Did you find everything okay? I mean, there'd be that element, I guess. But
take an active role. As a buyer, take an active role to assure that your financing is getting set up the way it needs to be set up from day one.
So when you think about all the paperwork, I mean, it really is more on a lender. I have a tough time saying, well, they should know, especially with the amount of paperwork they have to get. There's that re-engagement that you had talked about with the lender. Talk a little bit more about, or help me understand maybe about how that re-engagement should look.
Yeah, so we talked about earlier the process of somebody looking to buy a house from the first time they're thinking about it all the way to the day they get their keys. And during that period of time, maybe they meet with a lender in those first couple of weeks, but they don't end up actually buying for 4 to 6 months. I think it's key to keep engaged with your lender throughout the process. Keep sending them updated pay stubs. Keep sending them updated bank statements. Keep an eye on where rates are on any given day, so that way you don't see any major fluctuations that could change your approval. Just stay in touch with them. As properties pop up and you think about making an offer, make sure they have the stuff they need. So that way, if you need a quick close, because we're in a competitive market today, make sure that your lender has everything we need. So that way you can make an offer on day one and know it's going to close on day 30. So keeping that engagement, I think, is a huge part of things today.
I think you do make it's interesting to think, well, they should be engaging me, but this again, it's, that piece of knowing your market. Lenders are literally at capacity right now. And real estate, I think most people who are in the middle of a transaction right now are like, wow, why did all of a sudden, why are we not closing on time? I know there's lots of people who are dealing with that. And I think a lot of it is because there's this expectation it'll just get done, or there's an expectation, well, when I send in the paperwork, it's immediate. And things don't, the person you're talking to on the front end is not necessarily the person who is the end user of your pay stub. And they get, it's a tough, it's tough to think, it's tough to understand that sometimes, I think, as a consumer. But the reality of the situation is, there's some intermediaries that paperwork goes through to get to the end person, and it takes time.
Yeah, and we talked about this last week, that the documentation that we need now is higher more than ever, and it keeps getting worse on a daily and weekly basis. And it's not just because the lenders are getting tougher, the underwriting standards are getting tougher, it's just the whole nature of the business. That when we need stuff, and there's not a lot of logic to it sometimes, but when a good lender is going to tell you what they need and hopefully explain the why behind it, but just get them what they need as fast as you can. It's really going to help you in the long run as a consumer, whether you're a first-time home buyer or you've done this a billion times before. Being organized and being structured will really help the entire process out, and especially for everybody else, for you, the consumer, it's going to help you more than everybody.
Well, if you've done it a billion times before, you probably don't need a loan. You might have a lot of money for about a billion houses, but I got to call out the exaggerations because I think it's funny. So Ryan, let's, you get all the paperwork in, and now, I just talked about, you're not, as a lender or the person you're talking to, that's not the decision maker, quote unquote. it's going to an underwriter. There's a process. Mark Simmons was just on talking about the appraisal process. All part of this process that people go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think along with that process is having everything done up front in a timely period of time. But also, once you get deeper into this, there's some things you should not do. Part of the process, if you're a new buyer who's out there looking for homes, keep engaged with your lender, but make sure they explain to you or you think through making major decisions. Don't go out and buy and finance a car. Don't make large deposits. Don't transfer large amounts of funds. Don't pay off debt. Don't do certain things like make sure you don't quit your job and change jobs.
Isn't it amazing how often you see that? Oh, I got a new job. Don't worry. I start 3 weeks after we close, but I have enough money to get us through.
All these things can make a huge impact on having a smooth and eventful process, and they could really affect your pre-approval. That's why you always want to re-engage and make sure the decisions you're making aren't going to impact your ability to be approved. You find that dream house and now you can't get a loan on it. That's not fun. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen.
And there's and people, once they get that approval though, that's when they can start feeling a little bit more comfortable anyways. The lender tells them the underwriters approved it, the bank's comfortable with them more than just that pre-approval even. And then there's those next steps, which can be a little stressful. Again, we're here with Ryan Leopold with Cobalt Mortgage, and once you get all that paperwork in, now it's kind of back to the numbers and back to making sure the ducks are in a row and end up at where they need to. The paperwork ends up where it needs to go. What advice do you have for people who, right before maybe they're going in to sign the documents or right before they're going in to finish up the process?
So now we talked about before, you pre-approved, you look for houses, you're now under contract, it's going through the underwriting process. I think it's a couple things within that. I think one, we want to, and I think we take it for granted sometimes on the lending side and on the real estate side, how important it is to get a final approval as soon as we can. Whether we have a 30 or 45 day closing, if we can get an actual real approval pending no more conditions on day 15 to 18 of the process, and now docs are slowly going out and the client's slowly going in to sign those final documents at closing to be set up for funding, it's so much easier for everybody involved in the transaction if we can go out of our way to have that approval within the first 2 to 3 weeks as opposed to week 4 and 5. Makes a huge difference to everybody. And so that's our goal. And I think that the industry as a whole, that should be their objective. Yeah, and the client has control over that.
It only seems fair, though, that somebody would have more time to look at the paperwork that's going to, cost them $500,000, right? Like, oh, it's a $500,000 loan. It's quite interesting how often that paperwork just gets to the closing table an hour before, and people don't have time to review it. And it's a scary thought, but it's also a product of some people's systems, I think.
It's a product of the systems. It creates, when those things happen, it creates a stress, anxiety. It creates a not fun experience, which for a lot of people buying their first home, it should be a great experience. It's going to be stressful no matter what. Our job is to minimize that stress and try to make it as uneventful as possible. And I think all those things really help, especially if they can get there, like you said, and read the documents, schedule out 2 or 3 days in advance.
Know the moving trucks are going to be there, and there's going to be a house to move into. It
doesn't have to be as crazy as everybody makes it.
No, it doesn't. And that, do you think that has a lot to do with choosing the right real estate agent?
I think it has to do with choosing the right real estate agent and the right lender. I think they both go hand in hand. And I think that, choosing the right real estate agent, I think really is taking the time to understand them, their professionalism level, their experience level, the areas you're looking to buy in. Yeah. I think it's a big part of it. I've met too many people who said, oh, I'm using my cousin and he is helping us buy a property in Fife, let alone, his office is in Marysville. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think you should pick great professional experienced agents who specialize in areas.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, we do have to go to break again. That's Ryan Leopold with Cobalt Mortgage, who's going to also stick around at the end of the hour to, chat with us more about what's going on in the mortgage world. When we come back, Troy Anderson's going to join us with Keller Williams, and we're going to talk a little bit about the real estate owned world. Once those houses go through foreclosure, guess who owns them? The banks. What's going on with the bank owned properties? We're going to find out next.